Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere a little grimy, a little smoky, but surprisingly peaceful. The daily life of a Roman janitor. Picture this. You wake up before the sun rises, in a cramped stone alley behind a bakery that always smells like burnt flour and sweat. The air's still thick from last night's kitchen smoke, and someone nearby is groaning. Not unusual. You stretch, yawn, and fumble for your work tunic, which is stiff with dried vinegar and street dust. Your shift begins before the city even stirs. Chickens mutter to themselves in wicker baskets. Somewhere, a merchant slams a door. You're not a gladiator or a senator. You're not even a soldier or slave. But you, humble custodian of this chaos, are essential. Rome is a beast. It breathes, sweats, eats, and it very much needs to relieve itself. That's where you come in. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint up at the buildings, multi-level brick apartments, insula, stacked like stale honey cakes. Laundry flaps above like surrender flags. You step around yesterday's trash pile, now being examined by a stray dog with one ear and zero sense of shame. You're careful not to wake the old man who sleeps in the doorway. He sometimes throws olives. Your first stop, the water fountain. It's where janitors like you fill their buckets, rinse their rags, and pretend not to notice the fish bones bobbing along the curb. Today's water smells like iron and cabbage. Could be worse. You carry a wooden pole over one shoulder. It's got a worn-out bristlehead strapped on with waxed twine. The other hand clutches your cleaning kit, a clay jug of vinegar, a half bar of gritty olive oil soap, and a rag made from someone's ex-tunic. Not fancy, but functional. Historians still argue whether these tools were assigned by the city or bartered secondhand from former bathhouse slaves. Honestly, you think the answer is both. As you walk toward your first site, an entry courtyard off a quiet street, you pass other workers. A baker slapping dough with ancient fury, a young boy chasing a chicken and losing, a sleepy nobleman's slave carrying his master's urine jar. Yes, that was a thing. The ammonia in it gets used for laundry. Bet you're glad your job just involves muck. The courtyard's marble looks fine from afar, but up close it's a mosaic of dust, footprints, and something suspiciously sticky. You sigh. You've done this dance before. Step 1, splash the area with vinegar. Step 2, scrub in wide circles. Step 3, quietly mutter that the Roman Empire runs on your elbow grease. A rat watches you from under a bench. It seems unimpressed. You hum while you work. Not a real song, just a tuneless drone that matches your broom strokes. It helps drown out the occasional shout from a nearby domus where a couple is clearly having breakfast and an argument. One of your secret joys? Finding the small things no one else notices. Like a coin wedged to the drainage gap. It's sticky, tarnished, and might be cursed, but it's yours now. Pocketed. By now, the sun's peeking over the rooftops, gilding everything in warm orange. The streets are filling. Vendors unrolling cloth, kids playing knucklebones, and a cart piled high with what looks like lemons but smells suspiciously like pickled fish. Classic Rome. You greet a fellow janitor, Marcus, who once claimed he saw Emperor Nero's ghost picking its nose near the latrines. He tips his cap and makes a joke about the weather being ideal for scrubbing vomit. You nod solemnly. This is the bond of broom holders, the camaraderie of the clean. Mainstream historical fact? Rome employed city janitors, known as curatores cloacarum, to keep things tidy, though their status was barely above that of laborers. Fringe tidbit? Some janitors left graffiti complaining about noble spit being harder to clean than blood. You suspect this may still be true. You stop by a shop front to sweep away ashes from last night's torches. A passing child stares at you and asks if you're the one who eats dirt for coins. You pause, blink, and tell them only if it's imported dirt. They laugh and run off. You make a note. Develop comeback for next time. As your first hour ends, you feel the ache settle into your shoulders, familiar as an old friend. You roll them back, stretch, and sip a bit of water from your clay flask, lukewarm, slightly metallic, but refreshing in its own stubborn way. Just then, a woman opens a shutter above you and dumps a bowl of yesterday's stew into the alley. It misses your head by an inch. You look up, she shrugs and mutters, "Better than keeping it indoors." You nod. She's not wrong. By now, the morning's fully awake. Rome sings its grumbling, clanking, burping song. And you're part of the rhythm, broom in hand, oil in your pocket, and a full day's worth of mess waiting ahead. But for now, it's enough to lean on your broomstick, take a breath, and know you are the reason this ancient city doesn't drown in its own filth. Not bad for a job most folks pretend not to notice. Your next assignment is a cramped stairwell behind a tavern, 3 floors of sticky steps, scorched torch sconces, and the ever-present aroma of sour wine. You duck through the low doorway, nearly braining yourself on a lintel that's seen better centuries. The smell hits instantly. Spilled honeyed ale, sweat, and something egg-like. You've cleaned worse. Probably. These stairwells, narrow and often carved into the side of larger insulae, are where Rome's dirt goes to retire. Bits of fishbone, cracked dice, wilted herbs, and unmentionable slop coat the stone in a textured mosaic that no patron ever sees, but every janitor dreads. You kneel, bracing your back, and begin the long task of scrubbing downward, step by step, like some kind of very hygienic Sisyphus. Your tools clack softly against the stone, and as you work, you catch muffled voices from above. A couple arguing over gambling debts, someone loudly announcing their digestive troubles, and a lute player valiantly missing every 4th note. It's the soundtrack of domestic Roman life, messy, musical, and too loud before noon. You pause to adjust your belt pouch. It started to sag from the weight of small treasures you found already this morning. So far, 1 nearly intact wax stylus, 2 bronze buttons, and a folded note in Latin that says, "Tell no one, meet by the fountain." You smile. Mystery litter is your favorite kind. Mainstream historical fact: Roman apartments were often dangerously overcrowded, with wooden upper levels prone to fire and collapse. Janitors had to navigate them daily, hauling buckets and brushes up stairs that tilted slightly more each year. Quirky fringe detail? Some buildings had tiny god shelves halfway up the stairs, dedicated to lares, household spirits, which janitors were expected to bow to, or at least avoid insulting by spitting near them. You always give yours a quick nod. No reason to risk ghostly judgment over a dirty rag. At the second landing, you find a puddle of purple. Grape juice? Maybe? Wine? Blood? You sniff. Definitely wine. Maybe with a hint of regret. You mop it carefully, trying not to smear your already worn sandals, and mutter something about Dionysus needing a designated drinker. You pass a broom leaning against the wall, old, balding, clearly retired mid-shift. You salute it with quiet reverence. May your bristles rest easy. By the time you reach the ground floor again, your knees are stiff and your back pops like a garum jar being opened in winter. But the stairwell shines in its own modest way. Light from the street filters in, catching on damp stone and turning each drop into a golden badge of effort. You step outside and stretch, bones clicking like dice. A cart lumbers past, pulled by an ox that looks just as overworked as you. Its driver flicks the reins and shouts something about pigeon delays. Standard traffic. Your next task is less physical, more delicate. The public latrine. Now, before you recoil, remember Roman toilets weren't isolated stalls. They were social zones. Benches with keyhole cutouts arranged side by side where folks would sit and chat while doing their business. You've heard more gossip cleaning these benches than any bathhouse slave ever could. You approach cautiously. A pair of sandals stick out from behind one curtain, occupied. A chorus of groans from within confirms it. You knock politely, as is customary, then wait. A beetle scuttles by your foot. It looks like it knows secrets. Inside, the stone benches are cool and slick with condensation. You begin your usual circuit. Vinegar pour, quick scrub, rinse with water from your bucket, and a final polish with the soft side of your rag. It's meditative almost. There's something poetic about cleaning the places no one wants to talk about, reminding yourself that even emperors have to go somewhere. And speaking of emperors, historians still argue whether Augustus ever used the public latrines incognito. Some sources say he had a private toilet that was blessed by priests. Others claim he once held a Senate meeting from the comfort of a well-ventilated bench. You're inclined to believe the latter. That man loved multitasking. As you lean to scrub a particularly stubborn stain, the person behind the curtain finally emerges. A teenage boy who avoids your eyes and mutters, "Sorry." You nod. It's a shared dignity, this job. No shame, just shovels. A merchant lady passes by as you mop the threshold, balancing baskets of oranges on her head. She pauses, sniffs, and says, "Smells better than last week." You beam. That's basically a medal. Outside again, you rinse your hands in the nearby basin. The water's cold and tingles your skin. A pigeon lands beside you and pecks at your soap bar. You gently nudge it away. Not for you, friend. You pause for a moment, sitting on the edge of a curb. The street is alive now. Market cries ring out, "Fresh anchovies, 3 for a cesters." And somewhere, a child is laughing while sprinting barefoot through puddles. A dog barks, a goat responds. Rome sings on. And you, quiet janitor of stone and vinegar, sit amidst it all. For a moment, just a moment. Then a passing woman trips over a pot shard and spills barley everywhere. You sigh, stand, and get to work again. The barley crunches beneath your sandals before you even see it. Golden kernels scattered across the uneven stone road like someone tried to start breakfast and then gave up halfway through. The woman who dropped it is already apologizing to no one in particular, waving her hands and shouting something about slippery fingers and too many errands. You nod politely, but inside, you're cataloging your next hour. First, you'll need the bristle brush, because crushed grain is basically sticky glitter once the morning sun gets it. Then, you'll need to chase away the dog that's appeared out of nowhere, already licking at the mess like it's found Olympus on earth. You shoo it gently. "Not today, Cerberus." It growls once, purely out of ceremony, then slinks off to menace a fig seller down the road. Grain spills are a common problem in Rome. Between street vendors, merchant deliveries, and clumsy children with too much confidence and too little grip strength, you've swept up enough wheat to start your own small bakery, if you didn't mind the occasional pebble mixed in. You grab your brush and get to work, sweeping in tight, concentric circles, making a neat little pile that would probably make a centurion weep with pride. You're just finishing when an elderly man, toothless and beaming, ambles over and says, "Ah, just like Saturnalia when I was a boy. We threw barley for luck." You smile. That's not true, but it sounds charming, and maybe it was true once. Mainstream fact? Rome's markets operated nearly every day, and with no real packaging, food was carried openly, on heads, in arms, or balanced precariously on trays. Accidents were part of the routine, and janitors like you were essential in keeping the mess from fermenting underfoot. Quirky tidbit: some vendors swore that sprinkling a bit of spilled grain by their stalls kept rats away. You tried it once. It brought more rats. Very confident ones. With the barley cleaned and your arms slightly sore, you push your cart toward your next destination, the communal bathhouse. Not for a soak, though your aching back is definitely petitioning for one, but to tend to the mop corridor between the frigidarium and the tepidarium. It's the Bermuda Triangle of dripping feet, sloshed water jugs, and over-enthusiastic towel snapping. You enter the bathhouse through the side entrance, dodging a steam burst that nearly frizzes your hair. Inside, it's warm and echoey, voices bouncing off tiled walls like lazy birds. Men recline, gossip, scrub. Somewhere, someone's singing a song with lyrics that would make a toga blush. You pretend not to hear. The floor here is your territory. The moment someone drops a jug, or worse, a slippery bar of olive soap, it's up to you to keep the catastrophe contained. You lay down clean straw mats and begin mopping, the rhythmic swish of your rag mixing with the soft hiss of steam. It's oddly peaceful, almost spa-like. Except, for the guy loudly describing his toe fungus to his neighbor. Historians still argue whether Rome's janitors at bathhouses were respected members of staff or just tolerated background figures. Some evidence suggests they were tipped generously. Others claim they were invisible as long as the floor stayed dry. You prefer the theory that bathhouse workers were semi-mythical beings summoned only by the sound of a splash and a scream. You spot a pair of kids sneaking into the caldarium with figs hidden in their tunics. You make a mental note to check for smushed fruit later. The bathhouse may be about hygiene, but it's also about drama, and figs cause both. Your next task involves a task only you can perform: retrieving a clog from the drainage grate behind the warm pool. This is sacred janitor territory. Nobody else dares touch the mystery bundles that get wedged in there. Hair, bits of soap, the occasional sandal, and on one memorable day, a live crab. No one ever confessed how it got there. You kneel, pry open the grate, and reach in with your tongues. Squish, tug, plop. Out comes a soggy bundle of linen and something that might once have been an apple. You toss it into your waste bucket and say a quick prayer to Neptune, just in case. With the drain flowing again, you take a moment to wipe your hands and admire your work. The corridor gleams. The patrons don't notice. That's how you know you did it right. As you exit the bathhouse, the heat leaves your skin in a puff of fog. You feel temporarily lighter, cleaner even. You've earned a moment of rest. You head to a nearby fountain shaped like a lion's head, trickling clear water into a worn basin. You splash your face, sighing as the cold wakes up every nerving in your cheeks. A pigeon perches nearby and coos in disapproval. You splash it gently. It coos louder. Mutual respect is complicated. Just as you're drying off on a corner of your tunic, a man rushes by, trailing a trail of flower petals and shouting, "The bride is coming!" You watch him disappear around the corner, petals marking his path like a very floral breadcrumb trail. You know what that means: wedding cleanup. Not today, but soon. And sure enough, your supervisor appears behind you like a summoned specter. "There's a banquet tomorrow," he says. "Big one, wealthy family. You're on floor duty." You nod, resisting the urge to groan. Floor duty at a banquet means wine, breadcrumbs, olive pits, peacock feathers, don't ask, and probably one very inebriated philosopher who thinks spilling garum counts as deep metaphor. But that's tomorrow. For now, your list is checked. Your tools are cleaned. You lean back against a sun-warmed wall and let your shoulders drop. A woman walks by with a tray of honey cakes. She catches your eye, pauses, and hands you one wordlessly. You accept it with a small nod, and she walks on without looking back. You take a bite. Sweet, crumbly, a little burnt on one edge. Perfect. You chew slowly, thinking, not for the first time, that while your job may be mostly messes, some days end on a honeyed note. You wake the next morning to the sound of footsteps, clattering sandals echoing in the alley, vendors setting up, and someone nearby yelling far too cheerfully about fresh garum. You groan softly and roll off your straw mat. It's barely dawn. Rome is stretching its arms again. You dress quickly, strapping on your belt and wrapping your outer tunic like you've done 1,000 times. The fabric still smells a little like smoke from the brazier, and you kind of like it. Smells lived in, smells like yesterday. Today, of course, is banquet day. You grab your kit: bristle brush, waste bucket, spare cloths, a curved knife for scraping grime off marble tiles. Yes, that's a real thing. And a small pouch of oil mixed with ground pumice for shining floors. You nod at the boy who sells pickled onions outside your building. He's already eating one for breakfast. He offers you one. You politely decline. Banquet cleanup begins before the food is even served. That's the part no one tells you. You arrive at the domus, massive gates, tall columns, and a row of carved faces scowling down at you from the lintel. Wealth lives here, and it wears eyeliner. The front door opens before you knock. A servant eyes you like he's considering whether you're a person or a broom with legs. "Janitor?" he says. You nod. He waves you in. Inside, the atrium is already bustling. Cooks shout, musicians tune their lyres, decorators string flower garlands across the pillars. The whole place smells like roasted duck, pine resin, and stress. You pause, adjust your tools, and start scanning for the worst of it. Mainstream fact: banquets in ancient Rome were all-out sensory experiences, often lasting hours, sometimes days. The elite homes were polished to perfection before guests arrived, especially the mosaic floors. Quirky tidbit: some families paid extra to perfume their fountains with saffron or rosewater. Very fancy, very slippery. You've nearly fallen into one of those. You begin in the triclinium, the main dining area. Guests will recline on couches 3 deep, forming a U-shape around the central feast. The mosaic here depicts Neptune taming sea monsters, but right now it's dulled with dust, petals, and olive oil residue from last week's revelries. You kneel and begin scrubbing, careful not to fade the tiny tiles. It's slow work. Your knees protest. You hum a tune to pass the time, a half-remembered lullaby your mother used to sing when she swept out the family stall. As you polish, one of the entertainers skips past in golden sandals, humming a new poem and nearly stepping on your oil pouch. "Watch it," you mutter, mostly into the floor. He throws you a grin and disappears behind a curtain. You hope he flubs a rhyme later. You finish your corner of Neptune and move to the side hall. Here, you spot a small trail of wax drippings, likely from a candelabrum that tipped during rehearsal. Wax is the worst. It flakes, it sticks, it makes you rethink every career decision you've ever made. You warm it gently with a cloth, scrape it with the curved knife, and polish over it with the oil mix, like it was never there. Magic, but without the wand. Or credit. You're almost done when a voice calls out from behind a pillar. "Are you the janitor?" You turn. A middle-aged man in formal robes, probably the host. He's frowning, holding up a broken amphora handle. "Found this by the fountain. Can you?" You nod before he finishes. He's already forgotten you exist. You scoop up the shard and place it in your waste bucket. You wonder how many things break at these parties and are quietly removed before anyone notices. A silent archaeology of indulgence. Next comes the garden path, a narrow walkway lined with sculpted hedges and marble benches. You notice a trail of muddy footprints winding right through it. Of course, probably a musician again. Lute players, you've decided, are the worst offenders when it comes to floor etiquette. You fetch clean water from a servant's bucket and rinse the stones, scrubbing gently with your rag. Overhead, birds trill in the trees, mocking you with their leisure. You pause, stretch your back, and count your completed zones: atrium, triclinium, hallway, garden path. Almost there. As you return to the main room, a runner rushes past and knocks into your shoulder. You nearly drop your oil pouch again. He mutters an apology without stopping. You glare, then soften. He's probably just like you, overworked, underpaid, just trying not to get yelled at by someone in silk. Historians still argue whether Roman household staff were truly servants in the modern sense or something closer to specialized laborers. Some even suggest janitors, being trusted with property and often long-term hires, had a weird prestige among the help. You suspect that prestige didn't extend to better rations. Speaking of which, you finally accept a honey fig from a kind-eyed cook in the kitchen as you pass by. She calls it a bribe for not sweeping her station yet. You smile. You were saving the kitchen for last anyway. Smart lady. You take a bite. It's delicious, warm, sticky, full of seeds. You chew slowly, letting it soak into your tongue. The final stage of your prep is arranging fresh reeds along the corridor where guests will enter. It's symbolic, meant to purify the path, and also functional. Guests track in dust from the street. Reeds catch it. You spread them carefully, straightening each bunch with your foot. The effect is oddly elegant. It feels like something a priest might do, if priests also had to scrape amphora sludge out of fountains. With your tasks complete, you take a moment to wash your hands in a silver basin near the door. The water ripples. Your reflection stares back, tired, smudged, a little proud. Guests will arrive soon. They'll marvel at the food, the music, the finery. None of them will notice the way the tiles gleam or how the reed mats lie just so. That's fine. If they noticed, it means you hadn't done your job right. You nod to the gatekeeper as you exit. He grunts. That's probably the highest praise you'll get today. As you step back into the Roman afternoon, a breeze carries the scent of roasting meat and crushed mint. Somewhere, a flute begins to play. Probably the same guy who almost stepped on your tools. Figures. You walk away from the domus, your shoulders sore, but your steps light. Another banquet floor tamed. Another piece of the empire scrubbed clean. You don't get far before a voice calls your name, your real name, not just janitor or you there with the bucket. You glance over your shoulder and spot old Marcius hobbling toward you from the shade of a portico. He's leaning hard on a cane that looks like it's held together by stubbornness and string. Marcius used to be a janitor too. Now he mostly sits in the forum, feeds pigeons, and tells exaggerated stories to anyone who'll listen. You've heard him claim to have cleaned vomit from the steps of the Senate itself, twice. He waves you over. Got a job for you, he wheezes. Temple of Mercury. Stairs are sticky with sacrificial honey. You up for it? You nod. Sticky stairs are better than reeking latrines, marginally. So you head north, past rows of whitewashed shops and chattering matrons dodging a pair of boys racing each other with stolen cabbages. You take a shortcut through a side alley and pass by a wall plastered with fresh graffiti. A crude drawing of Emperor Claudius riding a chicken. Romans and their humor. The temple rises ahead, modest but gleaming in the late morning sun. Corinthian columns, a copper door, and a carved statue of Mercury perched above it all, looking smug as usual. You approach the stairs cautiously. Marcius wasn't lying. There's a clear trail of honey, thick and glistening, dribbled across 5 full steps. Bees are already investigating. One buzzes near your face and you flinch. You hate bees. You hate honey. You hate stairs. You set to work, first scattering ash to soak up the worst of it, then scrubbing gently with cool water and your stiff, bristled brush. The steps hiss softly with each stroke, like they resent the cleanup. You imagine the god of messengers smirking from above, enjoying the absurdity. Mainstream fact: offerings of honey, milk, and wine were common at Roman temples, especially for Mercury, who was associated with trade and travel. Leaving sticky residue was almost guaranteed. Quirky tidbit: in some cities, temple staff use trained monkeys to remove flower garlands after ceremonies. You're not sure you trust a monkey with garlands, let alone your ladder. Halfway through your scrubbing, a priest exits the temple and raises an eyebrow. "Did you bring sandal oil?" You blink. "I brought soap," he shrugs. "Close enough." You want to ask what he needs sandal oil for, but you know better. Priests are like philosophers. They love answering questions you didn't ask. As you clean, pilgrims arrive. A trader with bronze bangles presses a coin into the offering box. A mother whispers something to her child while nudging them forward with a clay jar. You step aside politely. Cleaning around worshipers is part of the rhythm. So is avoiding their judging looks when your tunic has cleaning stains. You finish the stairs and move on to the side alcove. This one's less sticky, more dusty, coated in incense ash and bird droppings. A perfect medley of the sacred and the profane. Historians still argue whether temple janitors were assigned based on civic duty, hired by the temple staff, or rotated among local workers. Some inscriptions mention payments made to cleaners of the sacred floor, while others hint that janitors may have been volunteer devotees. You've never volunteered to scrub bird poop in your life, so you're leaning toward hired help. You wrap up the job by polishing the brass incense stands near the altar. You run a soft cloth over each one, breathing warmth into the metal as you buff it. The stands glow faintly, golden against the cool marble. There's a strange kind of reverence in moments like this. No crowds, just silence, soft light, and the quiet scratch of cloth on bronze. You pause to stretch your back, then trace your fingers over a carved inscription at the base of the altar. "May this house be ever clean and its words ever true." You nod. You can respect that sentiment. Just as you pack up your tools, a young acolyte rushes in, clearly late, toga in disarray. He nearly trips over your bucket. You steady him before he falls face first into the newly scrubbed stairs. He blushes. "Thanks, sorry, the bees were chasing me." You point to the honey. "Oh," he says, "that was me." You sigh. "Of course it was." He offers you a fig from his pocket as a peace offering. You take it, grudgingly, but secretly pleased. 2 figs in one day. Must be a holiday. You leave the temple as noon bells echo faintly from the capital. Rome is in full swing now, merchants bartering, children shrieking, musicians plucking lyres and irritating nearby philosophers. You cross the street, careful to avoid a trail of goat droppings that's been there since yesterday. Someone else's problem today. You pause by a fountain to rinse your hands. A small girl watches you from the other side, then mimics your motion, dipping her fingers into the water and flicking droplets like a priestess. You grin and nod. She grins back. You sling your kit over your shoulder. Next stop, the public baths. A less glamorous assignment, sure, but you like the routine, the rhythm of scraping old oil and soot from the furnace room, scrubbing down benches, sweeping out sandal dirt. It's honest, repetitive, predictable. And after the chaos of temples and banquets, predictability feels almost luxurious. The baths of Agrippa loom ahead, steam rising gently from their roofs. You duck through the service entrance, nod to the bath steward, and brace yourself for the wet, echoing maze within. You smell eucalyptus, hear the distant slap of sandals on stone, and begin your descent into the hypocaust system. Time to clean under the city. Inside the baths of Agrippa, the air changes immediately. It's warm, humid, and carries a complicated scent: sweat, soap, oil, wet stone, and faint perfume from someone richer than they should be. You pause just past the threshold, allowing your skin to adjust, letting the mist cling to your forearms like a warm shawl. The floor beneath you thrums faintly. That's the furnace, the hypocaust system, breathing heat into the walls and under the floor like a sleeping dragon. You glance toward the long corridor that leads down to the furnaces. That's your job today. Soot duty. It's been 3 weeks since the last deep clean, and the grime under there is probably thick enough to write poetry in. You tie a cloth over your nose and mouth because you're not a complete fool and head down into the service tunnels. The stone steps echo under your sandals, and the air turns gritty, smoky, ancient. This is the underworld of the Roman bath, where warmth is created through sweat, fire, and the poor choices of whoever decided to burn damp olive wood this week. You crouch low to crawl into the first chamber. Brick pillars rise all around you, supporting the floor above. Each gap between them is lined with soot. You set your scraper against the wall and get to work, one careful stroke at a time. Mainstream fact: the hypocaust system was an early form of central heating, ingenious and effective, especially in bathhouses. Hot air from the furnace flowed through these subfloor spaces and up into the walls, warming the rooms above. Quirky tidbit: some historians believe bath attendants sometimes roast nuts or warm bread in the hypocaust tunnels. You consider this while scraping off a chunk of soot the size of your thumb. Doesn't seem very appetizing. You make slow progress, rhythmically chipping away. Each layer of soot tells a quiet story. Days of splashing, laughter, gossip, body oil, the scrape of strigils, the occasional off-key humming. You think you hear a rat skitter nearby, but it's hard to tell over the thrum of the furnace. There's a sharp cough from the far end of the chamber. Another worker, Titus, is already here, black-faced and grinning. "You take the left wall," he says. "Mine coughed back." "Yours always coughs back," you mutter. You work side by side, not talking much. Words get lost in the haze. Occasionally, you tap each other's shoulders and show off strange soot patterns. One that looks like a centurion's helmet, another like a fish with legs. The soot's an artist, apparently. After about an hour, you both crawl out, blinking against the sudden brightness of the main bath chamber. Everything above ground is crisp and clean. Steam curling along marble walls, clients lounging with towels, a harpist playing something soft and ridiculous. You're invisible here. You move into the next duty, collecting the used strigils from the dressing room. Most are lined up in orderly rows, but a few are hidden under benches, dropped into water bowls, or left precariously near the hot stones. You fish one out with tongues, still warm to the touch. Someone probably thinks it's lost. They'll complain, you'll shrug, they'll yell, then forget. One man, wrapped in a thin towel and a sense of entitlement, sneers at your presence. "You missed a spot," he says, gesturing vaguely toward the floor. You give a deep, theatrical bow. "Apologies, Dominus. I'll notify the floor immediately." Titus, still wiping soot from his face, snorts with laughter. The man doesn't get the joke. Historians still argue whether bathhouse janitors were attached to the curatores balnearum, bath officials, the private contractors who manage staff, or whether they fell under more generic civic labor pools. There's also debate about how much interaction they had with bathers. Some graffiti suggests the janitors were more familiar than the elite wanted to admit. You collect a final pile of strigils, oil flasks, and damp linen wraps, dumping them into a waiting cart. Then it's mop duty. Long, deliberate swipes across slick marble, careful not to disturb the lounging elite, but thorough enough to avoid tomorrow's scolding. You slip once, just a little, and catch yourself on a low bench. No one notices, or at least no one cares. A young boy approaches with an urgent expression. You brace for a complaint, but instead he thrusts a soggy scroll into your hands. For you, he says. You blink. Why? He shrugs. They said you'd know. You unroll it. It's a note, scrawled in a messy but familiar hand. Need help at the latrine. Bring resolve. Signed, Clodia. Clodia runs the public restroom near the market. A small but heroic woman with a strong back and stronger opinions. You sigh. That's the third time this week. You drop off your cart, wave to Titus, and head out. The market is humming when you arrive. Hawkers crying prices, animals bleating, people haggling over things that probably aren't worth the argument. The latrine is tucked in the far corner behind a row of stalls selling dates and dyed fabrics. Clodia's waiting, arms crossed, hair tied back with something that was once white. Overflow, she says. You nod. Inside or out? Both. Lovely. The Roman public latrine is an experience. Stone benches with evenly spaced keyhole-shaped holes, water channels flowing beneath, and sponges on sticks soaked in vinegar nearby. Theoretically clean. Realistically, not so much. You wade in, armed with a bucket of lye, a curved scraping blade, and the knowledge that whatever happens in this room will never be mentioned again. You've cleaned worse. Barely. As you scrub the stone, you hum quietly. A bit of a military march. Seems fitting. Someone outside is playing a flute, badly. A rat darts across the far wall. Clodia shouts something helpful like, "Don't forget the far corner." You've been here long enough that this doesn't even register as the worst part of your day. When you emerge, Clodia hands you a stale barley cake. Hero's reward, she says. You take it, you eat it. You regret it. She nods. Tomorrow, the fountain. Someone bathed their goat again. You stare. Same goat? Worse goat. Of course. You trudge away from the market, just as the shadows start to lengthen. The sun casts a golden hue over everything now, like it's trying to apologize for being hot and annoying earlier. Your next stop, the street drains near the theater. They tend to clog after big performances. But first, you pause at a roadside stall selling cold chickpea cakes. The vendor smiles. Half price for those who smell of furnace ash. You must look a mess. You buy one anyway. You eat the cold chickpea cake while walking, which is both ungraceful and deeply satisfying. It crumbles slightly in your hands, a mixture of garlic, herbs, and the unmistakable flavor of street dust. Still, better than that barley brick Clodia gave you. As you chew, you weave through a cluster of performers in garish masks, all shouting about tonight's comedy at the theater. One of them wears a donkey head and makes braying noises at children, and who shriek with joy and terror. You nod at him. He brays at you. Mutual respect. The theater is nearing its evening rush, but your job isn't among the audience. Your task lies beneath their feet. Literally. Behind the stage house and under the seating tiers, the runoff channels are clogged. Again, some genius keeps tossing fig leaves into the drains like it's some kind of offering to the sewer gods. The side entrance to the maintenance tunnel is low and narrow. You duck your head and slip in. The scent hits you immediately. Damp stone, fermented snacks, stale wine, and the unmistakable funk of 20,000 sandals. You fish out your gutter hook and brace yourself. Mainstream fact. Roman theaters were marvels of engineering, not just for acoustics and seating, but also for their water management. Rainwater and waste were funneled through carefully sloped stone channels under the stage and seating areas. Quirky tidbit. Theaters often had built-in pipe systems that doubled as smoke vents for special effects. Some janitors had to help release powdered pigments into the air to simulate fire or divine wrath. The tunnels twist, barely lit by slits in the upper walls. You crouch and swing the hook into the first corner. A thick clod of leaves, broken pottery, and some unidentifiable gloop comes free with a suckering sound that's much too dramatic. It splats on the stone like an angry jellyfish. You sigh, scrape it into your wastebasket, and move on. Halfway through, you find the real issue. Someone stuffed an entire amphora neck first into the drain. Who does that? You wedge your foot against the wall and yank. It comes free with a grunt and the smell of something that used to be olives, but is now a biological weapon. You gag. You finish anyway. Historians still argue whether janitorial roles like yours were filled by enslaved labor, paid contractors, or even rotating civic duty assignments. Evidence is frustratingly scattered. Graffiti, once again, offers tantalizing hints. Scribbles about bald Gaius and his never-ending mop, or drawings of men drowning in their own drain water suggest your job, while necessary, was rarely respected. Once the drains are flowing again, you emerge, soaked from the knees down and dotted with unknown substances. A passing noblewoman gasps at your appearance. You bow deeply and splatter a bit of theater juice on her sandals. You pretend not to notice. She pretends to be too rich to murder you in public. The sun's slipping now. Shadows lengthen across the marble walkways and colonnades. The crowds shift. Day workers melt into taverns. Torches flicker to life along the Via Sacra. The smell of roasted pine nuts and sweetened wine fills the air. You stop at a fountain near a crossroads, rinsing your hands and face. A little boy is trying to wash a wooden toy under the spout and keeps dropping it. You reach out and catch it mid-plunge. He stares, wide-eyed. "You dropped your soldier," you say, handing it back. He nods. "He's training. Good luck to him." You glance at the basin and note it's half full of goose feathers and soggy wreaths. Wonderful. You'll need to drain and scrub it tomorrow. Maybe you'll rope in Titus and promise him Clodia's leftover barley cake as payment. You keep walking. There's still one stop left on your route tonight. The Forum latrine. It's less crowded in the evening, but still lively. You step inside and immediately regret everything. The smell hits like a chariot. The floor is damp, the benches are full, and someone is loudly reciting a love poem while relieving himself. That's Rome for you, always mixing the sublime with the deeply, deeply inconvenient. You light your oil lamp and head to the far end. The gutter beneath the holes is sluggish again. You mutter, pull out your hooked pole, and start prodding the flow into motion. It's oddly meditative, gross but rhythmic. A man beside you comments on the weather. You nod. Another asks if you've heard the rumors about new taxes on goat milk. You grunt. Someone drops a coin into the flow and watches it swirl. "That's a wish," he says. You stare at him. "It's also illegal dumping." He laughs. "Don't tell the gods." It's dark now when you finally emerge. The stars are out. The city hasn't gone quiet, but it's gentler. The carts rattle less. The voices are lower. You pass a wine shop where a few customers are arguing about Cicero's latest speech. One says it was brilliant. Another calls it the verbal equivalent of goat flatulence. You'd agree, but you're too tired to form opinions. You lean against a wall for a moment, just listening. The night breeze smells of stone dust, olives, and faint jasmine. You take the long way back to the janitor's quarters. Your favorite detour past a statue of Mercury, who someone's dressed in a tunic 2 sizes too small. The gods have a sense of humor too, it seems. Near your doorway, you spot a fresh smear of ash across the paving stones. Titus left you a message. Check the laundry roof tomorrow. Pigeons. Always pigeons. You unlatch the wooden door, step inside, and let your shoulders drop. It's quiet here. Peaceful even. A small oil lamp glows on the shelf, a folded blanket, a fresh tunic laid out by someone kind, maybe the apprentice from the laundry, the one who whistles off key and keeps calling you sir by accident. You sit, you breathe, you stretch out your legs, crusted sandals and all, and let the weariness settle over you like a second tunic. And outside, the Roman night goes on. You wake before the sun. Again, it's not that you're naturally a morning person, it's just that the city has its own alarm system. A chorus of early vendor carts, bickering cats, and one particularly vengeful rooster that has taken up residence somewhere near the temple of Saturn. It screams into the stillness with a fury unmatched by any deity. You groan, sit up, and stretch. Everything cracks. Your knees sound like a bag of amphora tumbling down the steps of the Capitoline Hill. Your tunic is stiff from yesterday's grime. You change quickly into the cleaner one from the shelf, grateful for small mercies. Sandals on, water splashed to the face, a stale crust of bread as breakfast. Not ideal, but functional. Today begins with the bathhouse. Not for you, of course. You're not rich enough to steam your pores before work. You're going to clean it. Mainstream fact, Roman bathhouses opened at sunrise and stayed active through midday. Before they could serve their customers, they had to be pristine. Water had to be checked. Fires stoked under the hypocaust, underfloor heating. Oils replenished, floors scrubbed, and perhaps most crucially, slippery tiles unslimed. Quirky tidbit, some bathhouses employed fragrance boys, youths who walked through the steam rooms burning scented herbs or waving perfumed cloths to keep the air pleasant. These herbs were often stored near the janitorial supplies. You once confused lavender sachets with scouring rags. It did not go well. The bathhouse where you work isn't the grandest. It's not the baths of Caracalla or anything poetic like that, but it's still marble-clad and bustling. Your key jingles as you unlock the side door. It groans open with theatrical reluctance, and you're hit with a wave of yesterday's steam rot and lanolin oil. You make your rounds. Tepidarium? Still warm. Caldarium? Too warm. Someone forgot to rake the coals evenly. Frigidarium? Cold enough to kill a small hope. You nod. Time to begin. There's a rhythm to it now. You sweep with a long-handled broom, your bare feet slapping the mosaic floor as you go. The design underfoot depicts Neptune wrestling an eel. You always like that eel. He looks like he's enjoying the fight more than the god is. You dump the first bucket of water over the entry tiles and hear the satisfying hiss as it meets warm stone. The scrub brush follows. You whistle something vaguely melodic. It echoes off the walls, gets confused in the steam, and comes back sounding like a very apologetic ghost. Then the scent hits. Not the usual oil and feet bouquet, but something oddly pleasant, sweet, herbal. You turn the corner and find Marcus, the fragrance boy, with a handful of mint and marjoram, humming and waving the bundle around like a priest performing a particularly minty exorcism. He jumps when he sees you. Didn't hear you, sorry, you shrug. You're hard to miss with your smoke parade. Better than last week. Remember the time incident? You grimace. Still can't smell olives without thinking of that rash. The two of you fall into a sort of sleepy companionship. He swirls steam. You mop. Together, you resurrect this marble beast before the first client arrives to sweat off their hangover. Historians still argue whether the lowest-ranked bath staff were considered janitors or attendants, or both. There's overlap. One moment you're refilling oil jars, the next you're scrubbing dried fig pulp off the frigidarium bench. There's no union. There is, however, a shared understanding among workers. Don't question the mysterious sludge in the corner. Just clean it and move on. Marcus finishes his circuit and hands you a warm fig pastry. Stolen, obviously, but you're not the morals committee. You eat it. Crumbs fall. You clean them. The cycle continues. The first patrons trickle in, mostly older men who argue loudly about grain prices while disrobing. One greets you like an old friend despite not knowing your name. He does this every day. You nod, as always, and move on. By mid-morning, the place is a riot of slapping feet, gossip, and overused loofahs. Your shift ends with a final check of the drains, still flowing, and a quiet moment by the fire pit. The coals glow low. You poke them gently. They sigh back. Then it's on to your next stop, the warehouse district. This one's a walk, and your legs are not thrilled. You pass bakeries and smithies and temples, each belching out their own flavors of heat and noise. You pass a girl selling clay dolls, one shaped like a gladiator with absurdly large arms. You pass a pickpocket and a priest mid-debate. Same target audience. The warehouses are cooler, built thick with brick and shade, but they also house Rome's most stubborn debris: straw, broken crates, olive oil stains the size of Gallic provinces. You check in with the foreman. He grunts, points, and returns to yelling at a goat stuck in a sack of lentils. The job is straightforward. Clean up after the morning shipment. You sigh and start sorting. Broken amphorae go in one pile. Intact but smelly? Another pile. Wet straw? Toss it. Dry straw? Reuse. You could do this in your sleep. You probably have. There's a funny kind of calm in the clatter of wood and clay. You work methodically, like a human abacus, ticking off each zone. You find a mouse nest, a very old shoe, and something that might have once been a leak. You sweep, you scrub, you nudge a few rats into a better neighborhood. And then, just before lunch, a thunderclap of noise. A crate drops. Men shout. Someone trips. A barrel bursts open and sends a stream of pickled fish down the central aisle. You blink, you sigh, you fetch your mop. Again. Lunch comes late, and not in a triumphant, trumpet-blaring feast kind of way. More like a whispered afterthought. You sit on a broken crate, hands smelling faintly of vinegar and regret, and chew on what is technically a sandwich, if two thin slabs of barley bread wrapped around a suspicious smear of lentil paste count as such. It's not bad, per se. It's just honest. Very Roman in that way. The alley near the warehouse offers a patch of dappled sun. You lean back against the warm brick, eyes half-lidded, and let yourself drift. Not into full sleep, never that. Not in a place with stray dogs and stray thieves, but into something like a half-nap. A slow blink between the hours. Your peace lasts exactly 11 minutes. Then your name is shouted, badly, and you're jolted back to full consciousness. You sigh, wipe your mouth, and return to the world of crates and curses. The next task is one you dread more than sewer work: supervising a public latrine. Mainstream fact: Roman public toilets were surprisingly advanced. Long benches with keyhole-shaped openings, continuously flushed by water channels beneath, and sometimes even sponge sticks for cleaning. Of course, none of this mattered when half the city forgot how to aim. So here you are, the unofficial guardian of the 12 holes of mercy near the Forum. You sweep, you scrub, you pray silently to Cloacina, goddess of the sewer, to lend you strength or at least immunity. Fringe tidbit: some latrines were known to explode. No, really. Methane gas buildup, careless torch placement, kaboom. There's a city edict now about flame discipline near enclosed toilets. You keep a bucket of sand nearby just in case someone gets reckless with their reading lamp. The noon sun makes the latrine smell particularly assertive. You tie a strip of cloth around your nose. It helps. Barely. You chase out a group of prankster teens trying to tip over the soap jar. One sticks his tongue out. You raise your mop like a javelin and he flees. Dignity, optional. Victory, yours. Cleaning continues. A senator passes by. You nod. He pretends not to see you. Another man tips you a coin, half a sestertius. You pocket it quickly before the overseer can claim it as lost property. You earned that coin. You've inhaled things that should never have been exhaled. Historians still argue whether these janitorial roles were filled by enslaved labor, low-caste citizens, or a blend of both. Records are patchy, but your joints tell you you're definitely at the bottom of someone's list. After the latrine, you stop by the public fountain to rinse your hands, arms, face, soul. Cold water rushes over your skin. You exhale. It's the best part of the day so far. You linger, then it's off again. This time, your job is decorative, but no less tedious. The Temple of Castor and Pollux has requested emergency cleanup. A visiting dignitary is expected. You've done this before. Sweep, polish, make everything smell vaguely less like pigeon. You enter through the servant door, nod to the board guards, and begin. Marble floors echo beneath your sandals. Incense lingers thick in the air, though the burners are cold. You step carefully around the altar, avoiding the sacred circle. Not because you're superstitious, just because someone always yells if you smudge it. Your tools are humble: soft cloths, beeswax, elbow grease. You buff a statue of Pollux until his abs glint in the torchlight. You dust a frieze of horses with a reverence that surprises you. There's something oddly peaceful about it. This quiet attention to symbols, to spaces meant to impress gods and men alike. You polish the steps last, crouched low, the stone warm from filtered sunlight. A priest passes by and mutters a blessing in your general direction, or possibly a warning. You smile anyway. You finish just as the foreign party arrives. Loud voices, elaborate cloaks, pointed sandals. One man has a monkey on a chain. The monkey makes direct eye contact with you, bares its teeth, and then steals a fig from the offering bowl. You walk away before anyone can ask questions. By now, your body is a symphony of tiny aches. Your hands are nicked. Your back is protesting, but you're not done yet. There's one last detour, a neighborhood courtyard plagued by persistent graffiti. Not clever graffiti either. Crude, vulgar, unoriginal. The residents want it gone. So you mix a thick chalk paste, grab your trowel, and get to work. Each smear covers another bit of crude humor, another lewd stick figure, another Lucius was here. You try not to read them too closely. Some are funny, one makes you snort. You cover it anyway. Halfway through, a child appears, barefoot, curly-haired, grape-sticky fingers, and watches you silently for 10 minutes. Then she says, "Why do you cover the drawings?" You pause. "Because some people think the walls are theirs to ruin." She nods solemnly and then runs off. You find her name scratched into the wall moments later. You chuckle, shake your head, and cover it last. The sun is dipping now. The shadows grow longer. Your tunic sticks to your back. You wring out your rag and sling it over your shoulder. The wind carries the smell of roasted onions and spiced wine from a nearby taberna. It's time to go home. But first, a stop by your favorite fountain. Not to clean this time, but to sit. You lean back against the cool stone, listen to the trickle of water, and let your eyes drift half shut. A few other janitors pass by. One waves, one doesn't. That's fine. You think of all the things you cleaned today. Fish guts, bathhouse slime, chalk curses, and marvel at how the city continues to sparkle in spite of itself. Tomorrow, it'll all be dirty again. But that's okay. It means you're still needed. You wake up to someone tossing a fig pit into the fountain. It plops gently, circles expanding outward like the afterthought it was, and you sigh, stretching joints that really didn't ask to be consulted. The fountain's cool edge has numbed your backside a little, but honestly, that's preferable to the ache. You stand, dust yourself off, and begin the last part of the walk home. Evening in Rome is not like the mornings. It's warmer, softer, a little less defensive. The crowds thin, markets shudder. The shouting fades to murmurs. You pass doorways spilling laughter and steam. Lanterns flicker overhead, their oil-slicked flames fluttering as if gossiping with the wind. You cross a narrow bridge. Below, the Tiber meanders like it has somewhere better to be. A boy tosses a pebble from the railing. It misses, clinks off the stones, and he shrugs like he meant to do that. Your sandals scuff over worn cobbles as you move through your insula's alley. Laundry still flaps on high ropes. Someone is arguing with a dog in what sounds like Etruscan. The dog barks back. You don't get involved. Finally, you're building. Mainstream fact. Most working-class Romans lived in insula, multi-story apartment blocks that were often overcrowded, flammable, and poorly maintained. The ground floors were prized and expensive. You live on the fourth. Your calves have accepted this. You nod to the neighbor's grandmother seated on the stairs, stringing lentils with hands like river stones. She grunts, which is basically a love poem in this part of town. Climbing the stairs, you pass the usual landmarks, the damp spot that never dries, the chipped mosaic of Neptune someone once tried to sell as Greek modern, and the door with the eternal smear of olive oil. You don't ask. Your room, when you finally reach it, is modest. A cot, a chipped table, a small shelf that leans slightly to the left. The breeze comes in through a window the size of a watermelon. There is a jar of olives that you swear keeps refilling itself mysteriously. You light a small clay lamp and begin the sacred ritual. Removing your sandals, you wince. Your feet look like they've been personally insulted by the goddess of walking. You soak them in a basin of rainwater, cold and perfect. Fringe tidbit: some Romans believed soaking the feet each night prevented nightmares. It's unclear whether this actually worked, but your toes definitely sigh in relief. Your evening meal is whatever's left from 2 days ago. Spiced lentils, a sliver of cheese that's trying to turn into something else, and a single dried fig. You chew slowly, each bite anchoring you after a day of being everywhere and nowhere. Historians still argue whether Roman laborers found joy in their routines or merely endured them. But tonight, under this crooked ceiling, you feel something that isn't quite joy, but isn't misery either. Maybe it's just peace with low expectations. After dinner, you sit on the edge of the cot and listen. To the street below, to the thump of a broom 2 floors down, to a lullaby sung in a language older than Latin. You polish your hands with a cloth, not out of necessity, but habit. The movements soothe. The cloth was your mother's. Or maybe it just reminds you of hers. You lie down. You forget the rest of the city exists for a moment. Then a knock. Not dramatic, not urgent, just persistent. You open the door and find your neighbor's son, age 5, holding a clay bowl larger than his head. Ma says, "Do you want stew?" You blink. Yes. He nods solemnly and hands it over. Then he just stands there. You take the bowl. Thank you. He still doesn't leave. You offer a dried fig. He takes it and bolts. Back inside, the stew is warm, slightly smoky, and filled with vegetables you didn't know were in season. You mutter a quiet thanks, then eat, carefully balancing the bowl on your knees. When it's empty, you set it aside and finally, let yourself fall backward. Not fully asleep yet, just horizonted in that soft Roman dust that feels less like night and more like the world taking a breath. The lamp sputters. Outside, someone is singing. Badly, but with conviction. You smile. In this little room, in this gigantic, contradictory city, your job may not be glamorous. It may not be remembered in scrolls or etched in marble, but it holds things together. Without you, the baths stink, the temples crumble, the wine spills, the floors crunch. You make the daily miracle of cleanliness possible. You, a Roman janitor, keep civilization marginally less sticky. And now that the day's done, your eyelids sink lower. The heat lingers, trapped between roof tiles and plaster. The lamp's glow settles into shadow. One last thought occurs to you before sleep reaches in. Tomorrow, someone will forget your name again, but not your work. You wake up just before dawn, the sky outside still unsure about becoming blue. There's that moment, just before full consciousness, when you think maybe you're still dreaming, that your limbs are light and time hasn't restarted yet. But then your back reminds you, nope, still real, still Roman, still a janitor. The lamp has gone cold. The room smells faintly of old stew and sandal leather. You pull yourself up slowly, like a curtain reluctantly rising on a one-man tragedy with excellent sweeping technique. There's work to be done. You wash your face with water that's grown surprisingly judgmental overnight. The cloth is stiff, the air is brisk. You mutter something unprintable about Jupiter's sense of humor. A quick tug at your tunic, wrinkled, clean enough, mildly damp from last night's foot soak. It'll do. Before you leave, you pause to tie the leather cord around your waist. Not just for utility, it's habit, ritual even. Every Roman worker has one thing they do that tells their body, all right, it's showtime. Yours is the knot. Outside, the city is hushed, mainstream fact. Roman cities like Rome or Ostia started stirring before the sun rose, especially for workers. The best cleaning happened early, before shops opened, before the senators began strutting, before the streets filled with sandals, wheels, and unrelenting commentary. You walk in rhythm with the city's breath, passing others like you, early risers, some sweeping doorsteps, others hauling baskets. You nod at the baker, who's already elbow-deep in dough. He grunts again, which in this neighborhood means, may your intestines behave today. The forum is still in shadow when you reach it, but that's perfect. There's something about cleaning the steps of the Basilica Julia with no audience. Just you and the stone, and the occasional pigeon looking at you like you've personally insulted its career choices. You unroll your tools, your pride and joy, a bristle broom, a curved metal scraper, a cloth soaked in lemon oil, which smells better than half the temples, and a hook stick for nudging uncooperative detritus. Some people dream of swords or golden laurel wreaths. You dream of bristles that don't snap. Quirky tidbit, ancient Roman janitors, though not called that exactly, often use crushed shells, sand, and even stale urine to scrub floors. You skip the urine today. Let's call it a personal boundary. You start with the marble. Basilica steps always catch the worst of it. Dust, crumbs, love notes drop mid-flirtation, bits of toga that no one wants to claim. You sweep in long arcs, listening to the bristles sing their dry little lullaby across the stone. A lizard watches from a crack in the wall. The sun peeks over the temple roofs now, casting long, theatrical shadows. Everything turns gold for 5 minutes. Your broom, the broken tiles, the sleeping city itself. It's enough to make you forget the ache in your shoulder. You pause, stretch, breathe in the scent of morning bread drifting from a side alley. You'd steal some if you weren't such a model citizen. And also if the baker didn't look like he could bench press an ox. You continue. Next, the mosaic floor under the portico. It's beautiful, even under the grime. Tiny tessera, those little square tiles, arranged like stories told in geometry. A fish, a spiral, a vine curling toward nowhere. You always clean this part slowly, not out of laziness, but reverence. You're not just scrubbing dirt, you're revealing someone's handiwork from 100 years ago. Historians still argue whether janitors were seen as invisible servants or quietly revered keepers of public dignity. You figure it depends on the day. Some folks walk by and say thank you. Others pretend you're part of the wall, but you know your worth, and so does that mosaic. By mid-morning, the city stirs for real. Vendors haul carts into place. Priests squabble about incense amounts. A woman yells across the square that someone took her goose, and someone else yells back that it probably left of its own free will. You step aside as a magistrate totters up the stairs you just cleaned. He nods once, You nod back. Mutual respect exchanged wordlessly, like two gladiators in a very dull coliseum of sweeping. You feel good. Sweaty, sure, but good. There's one last spot, the latrine behind the forum. Yes, that one. It's the thing no one talks about at dinner, but silently blesses when nature calls. You've got a routine. Scrape, pour water, scrub with vine ash, reapply oil, replace the sponge stick holders, don't ask. Light a bit of frankincense to chase off lingering regrets. Fringe tidbit: Romans used communal toilets with shared sponge sticks, cleaned, theoretically, between uses. You try not to dwell on that fact while handling them. A child peeks into the latrine and asks if you've seen a red ball. You blink. It rolls in a second later. You kick it gently toward him. He beams and vanishes. You smile. It's the little things. Your shift winds down as the sun rises higher, turning stone to heat. You gather your tools, roll them back into your cloth satchel, and take one last look around the now shining courtyard. It's clean, it's quiet, it's Roman. You begin your walk home. Tomorrow it'll be dirty again. That's just how it goes. The city never stays still, neither do you. But for now, you've done your part. You restored order, you removed the crust of chaos, you made marble gleam, and you did it all before the senators even belched themselves awake. You're walking home now, boots dusted with crushed marble and tiny disappointments, tunic clinging just enough to remind you that laundry is tomorrow's problem. The streets are properly awake. Peddlers shout names of fruits you know are out of season. Children zigzag like frantic bees, shrieking joy and doom in equal measure. A philosopher is already lecturing a wall, and the wall is losing the argument. You stop for a cup of watered wine. Yes, watered. The full-strength stuff is for evening regrets, not mid-morning thirst. The cup is cracked, but it holds, much like you. There's a bench you favor near the intersection of nothing special and just enough shade. It's under a fig tree, which is generous with its leaves and occasionally its fruit. You sit, you let the world move around you for a bit. A dog sniffs your sandal, considers you unworthy of a bark, and moves on. A young couple argues and whispers about dowry expectations and the fact that his mother is always lurking. You try not to laugh out loud. You fail a little. Mainstream fact: Roman cities were loud, noisy, bustling, crowded places. Privacy was a concept more than a reality. Even wealthy homes had thin walls and open courtyards. You're never alone in Rome unless you're lost in the baths or 6 feet under. You head home the long way, past the statue of that senator with the unfortunately chiseled nose. Local kids have taken to hanging garlands around it and calling him Flavius the Sniffer. You approve. Even marble deserves a little mockery. As you turn down your alley, a familiar voice calls your name. It's Manius, your occasional neighbor, constant borrower of things he forgets to return. Today it's a brush he needs. For what, he doesn't say. Probably nothing involving actual brushing. You give it to him anyway. You climb the stairs to your apartment, 3 floors up, which is just high enough to remind you of your knees. Inside, the air is warm. Not hot, not stale, just lived in, like bread left out, but still edible. You change tunics, toss the used one onto the bench, and open your shutters. The city is a painting you never get tired of, if not for the beauty, then for the moving parts. Roofs of orange tile, steam from pots, laundry flapping like surrendered flags, someone playing a reed pipe badly, someone else singing along, worse. You clean your tools carefully. The bristles get their rinse. The scraper gets a rub down with cloth. The little oil bottle is refilled. It's your post-shift ritual, like putting soldiers back into armor for tomorrow's battle. Quirky tidbit: many Roman workers, especially those in manual trades, personalize their tools, carving initials, binding handles with dyed cords, even offering tiny prayers. Your broom has a name, though you'll never admit it out loud. It's Scroobius, but we're not telling. With tools restored, you collapse onto the low couch, not to sleep, just to stretch, to exist horizontally, to remember what not sweeping feels like. There's a pigeon on your windowsill. It stares like it's judging your posture. You stare back. It blinks first. Time for lunch. You grab a small plate of lentils and bread. Cold, but they do the trick. You sprinkle a bit of garum on top because flavor is the last frontier of the working class. Historians still argue whether the daily life of common Romans was miserable or manageable. The truth, you suspect, lives somewhere in the gap between stomach fullness and how long your sandals last. Today, you're all right. You chew, you stare, you listen. Someone's singing again. A child, maybe. Or someone drunk early. Could be both. You let your eyes close. Not to nap, exactly. Just to visit the edge of sleep and peer in. The cool breeze stirs your hair. A distant cart rumbles over stones, the city hums, and in your mind, the floor of the Basilica Julia gleams. It's a silly thought, one moment of shine among countless others, but it's yours. No one will write poems about it. No crowds will cheer your name. But somewhere, a sandal will strike stone, and the sound will be clean, clear, perfect. You did that. A knock at the door. It's your apprentice. You forgot they were coming by today. They're holding a bundle of new bristles and a question about oil ratios. You wave them in. There's always time for knowledge. Besides, they brought figs. You sit on the floor with them and go over the proper way to wrap twine around a worn brush head. You correct their grip. They sigh. You smile. Eventually, the talk shifts to temple gossip, to the new bakery down the street, to whether anyone has ever fallen into the aqueduct on purpose. You don't solve anything, but the figs are good. The sun starts to angle low. You walk your apprentice out, telling them to remember the 3 golden rules. Sweep with the grain, always check for poop before kneeling, and never trust the senator's directions. They laugh, they wave, they vanish into the crowd. You stand in the doorway for a moment, watching the street change color under the waning light. Another day nearly gone. You lean against the doorframe, arms crossed, letting your back rest for real this time. No more cleaning, no more figs. Just this, the moment between duties when the world hasn't asked anything of you in 5 whole minutes. It's nice. Tomorrow will come, of course. More grime, more stairs, more latrine mysteries that no man should face sober. But for now, you are still. You are whole. You are a Roman janitor. And despite everything, you kind of love this job. Evening stretches across the rooftops like a slow-spilling pitcher of wine, rich, warm, and tinged with something almost sentimental. You're back inside, closing the shutters one panel at a time, letting the last rays stripe your modest little apartment like sunbars across a quiet prison. Dinner simple. Yesterday's bread softened in watered honey, a smear of soft cheese, a handful of olives that might be past their prime but are still more polite than most senators. You eat slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because chewing reminds you to sit still. Mainstream fact, the evening meal in ancient Rome, known as cena, was often the day's largest. But for folks like you, plebeians without the coin or stomach for lavish spreads, it's more of a quiet apology from your pantry. No course changes, no reclining banquet couches, no flute players fluttering about, just crumbs and quiet. You clean your fingers with a worn rag. Not exactly a linen napkin, but it's clean enough to fool the dark. Outside, lamps flicker to life, one by one. Oil and flame and good intentions. They sputter sometimes, protesting the wind or their own mortality, but eventually settle, just like you. You pull a blanket over your legs and let your back sink into the wooden bench by the window. It creaks because of course it does. Everything does. The city is a symphony of old joints. The neighbors are arguing again. Not fighting, just competitive disagreeing. About goats or who left the gate open or whether someone stole a fig and blamed it on the wind. You smile into the dim. Then comes your favorite part of the evening, the lull. That lovely half hour when everyone is just waiting for sleep. Children stop pretending to be asleep. The bakers stop pretending they're done for the day. The city exhales. You remember the marble floor. Again, quirky tidbit. Roman janitors, custodes, or liberi mundisharum, depending on the era, sometimes left tiny etched messages in hidden corners of their buildings. Not for glory, just notes. Scratched hearts, crude faces, or single words. Seen, finished, mine. You've thought about leaving one too, maybe behind the cistern wall. Something like, was here, didn't quit. Not profound, but true. You step back into your sandals, just once more. A short walk before bed. Down the stairs again, because your body craves movement even when your mind protests. Onto the stone street, cool beneath the arches. You walk without direction, which is a small act of rebellion in a city so obsessed with order. The forum is mostly empty now, except for a few drunkards practicing speeches at invisible crowds. One tries to sell you a poem. It rhymes. Badly. You give him a coin anyway. Poetry deserves pity. You loop back around the public baths. Steam ghosts out the vents. Someone's laughing inside, loud and reckless. You envy them for exactly 3 seconds before remembering wet sandals and slippery floors. No, thank you. You lean on a column and look up. The stars are faint, blurred by smoke and life. But they're there. You try to count them. You fail, but that's not the point. Historians still argue whether Romans viewed the stars as practical tools for navigation or divine fingerprints meant to remind people they weren't in charge. You're pretty sure it's both, especially when Orion shows up late, like a bureaucrat with sandals untied. You think for a second of your parents, both gone long enough that your memories are more like stories now. Your mother, who scrubbed so hard she gave herself blisters just to make marble shine like polished teeth. Your father, who swore the best broom was confidence. You smile, quietly, inside your ribs. A breeze rolls in, not cold, just honest. You start back toward home, passing the temple steps. A priest is sweeping them, humming. You don't interrupt, you just nod, and he nods back. It's a universal gesture among sweepers. You sweep, I sweep. Respect. Back up the stairs again, slower this time but satisfied. Inside, you light your little clay lamp. The wick flutters like it's nervous, then steadies. The room warms slightly. You set your sandals by the door, left foot first, always, and settle onto your sleep mat. The blanket pulls across your legs. Your knees crack like startled doves. That's fine. They're telling stories. You breathe. Not a big breath. Just enough. Your broom stands in the corner, quietly regal. Tomorrow it will sweep again. Tomorrow you will scrub again. Tomorrow the latrines will still exist. But right now, they don't. Because now you are still. You think again of that marble floor, not the smell or the cracks or the mildew creeping near the drain, just the shine. Someone will walk across it tomorrow. They'll hear their own sandals slap, echoing clean, echoing proud. They won't thank you. They won't know your name, but they'll notice the gleam. And maybe, just maybe, they'll feel better for it. Maybe that's enough. Morning comes slowly, creeping up like a polite guest rather than crashing in with fanfare. You stir before the sun fully clears the rooftops, because that's just what your body does now. No alarm, no rooster, just the quiet sense that the day is already waiting, tapping its foot gently at the door. The mat is a little stiff beneath you, and your blanket has bunched itself into a lumpy argument. You stretch, hearing those small, satisfying pops in your shoulders and spine, the soundtrack of age and effort. It's not glamorous, but it's real. You sit up and take a moment before standing, just a moment to listen. The sounds of Rome waking are familiar. The soft roll of wagon wheels, someone hammering, dogs barking like they have urgent thoughts. A baby is already crying next door, future orator in the making. Mainstream fact, in ancient Rome, work began at or just before dawn, especially for laborers, bakers, and janitors. There were no weekends, no coffee breaks, no pity parties, just the rhythm of rising early and staying useful. Your hands move on their own, folding the mat, brushing crumbs, tying your tunic. You've done it so many times they might as well belong to someone else now. A better version of you on autopilot. You boil a little water, steep some herbs, not because they do anything dramatic, but because warm liquid first thing in the morning is one of civilization's few consistent mercies. You eat a fig, it's overripe, still sweet though. Life lesson in that. As you gather your tools, broom, bucket, folded rag, you catch your reflection in a bowl of water. You pause. You look tired, yes, but not worn down, just lived in, like the city itself. You step outside and the morning air greets you like an old friend with cold hands. You breathe it in. It's dustier than you hoped, but clean enough to count. The janitor's path takes you through the usual checkpoints, past the bakery where loaves are already cooling, past the well where water is being pulled in a rhythm older than empire, past two lovers arguing, then kissing, then arguing again, and finally into the building. It's quiet. The early shift is always quiet. You unlock the doors or maybe just wedge them open. They never really lock, not from you. The broom touches the floor and you begin your first circuit. Historians still argue whether Rome's custodians were slaves, freeborn workers, or a mix of both. The truth likely depends on where you look, when you look, and who's telling the story. But you know this, you have your name, your space, and your pride. That counts for something. You hum as you sweep. Not a song, just a tune your mother used to mutter while peeling vegetables. You don't even remember the words anymore, just the shape of them in your mouth. A senator's assistant walks by, doesn't say a word. That's fine. You weren't sweeping for him. You scrubbed the grime from a mosaic tile, a little fish, startled and blue. You'd forgotten it was there. You pat it dry with the rag like it's a child you've just bathed. Quirky tidbit. Some janitors in Roman bathhouses use strigils, the curved metal tools meant for scraping oil off skin to clean soap scum off the walls. You've never done that. Seems a bit excessive, honestly. But it does make you wonder who first realized a grooming tool could double as a scrubber. The day unfolds in a slow parade of tasks. Replace the reed mat by the threshold. Untangle the pulley ropes for the curtains. Empty the basin that someone always forgets to drain. You fix a crack in the cistern wall, not because anyone told you to, but because you noticed it yesterday. It takes a moment, a smear of pitch, a press of cloth, a whisper of care. Someone comes in to pray. You don't interrupt. Someone comes in to sleep. You nudge them awake, gently. Outside, the city gets louder, but in here it stays quiet. You like it that way. You pause to rest on the marble bench, the one you cleaned with vinegar last week. You tilt your head back and stare up at the domed ceiling, counting the cracks, the birds' nests, the spots where candle smoke has kissed the plaster. You think about what it means to care for a space others only pass through, to catch their dirt, their noise, their indifference, and still make things better for the next person. You wonder, not for the first time, if this is what gods feel like. Probably not, but maybe a little. You grab the broom again, sweep the edges, chase the dust out, give the floor a final once-over. Then you stand in the doorway, watching your own work in the light. It shines, not brightly, just enough. That's your signature, your version of a fresco, Your brushstroke in the grand gallery of Roman order. You step out, leaving the space just a little cleaner than you found it. And even though no one will say your name today, no statue, no poem, no parade, you carry something invisible that matters more. You kept the city breathing. You turned filth into grace. You made something ordinary feel like it was worth remembering. The afternoon hums with a lazy rhythm, the way the city exhales after a morning rush. You finish the rounds. The tools are rinsed and hung to dry. Your bucket rests upside down on its peg like a little sleeping tortoise. There's a certain hush to this part of the day, when the sun slants in sideways and people either nap or pretend to be busy. You take this as your cue to disappear for a while. No one notices when the janitor walks away, and maybe that's the greatest superpower you've ever had. You cut through a side street, past a row of fig trees bowing under the weight of their fruit, and head toward the river. Not for a bath, though your shoulders wouldn't mind one, but just for a bit of peace. The Tiber is moving slow today, like a lazy snake. The reeds are whispering things you'll never quite understand. You find your usual spot on the bank, between two smooth stones. It's warm here, safe, the kind of place the world forgets on purpose. Mainstream fact, the Tiber was the lifeblood of Rome, crucial for trade, for transport, for rituals, and often for washing off the literal dirt of the day. It flowed past palaces and brothels alike, treating them all with the same murky equality. You settle into the grass, letting your muscles finally release their grip on the day. It's not that your work is backbreaking, not exactly, but it's the repetition, the endless loop of doing things no one sees, the eternal mystery of whether clean floors really stay clean when your back is turned. A fish jumps. You flinch slightly, then smile. Maybe he mistook you for a statue. Your fingers trace idle shapes in the dirt, spirals, suns, something that might be a goat if you squint sideways. You hum the tune again, your mother's tune, and watch a dragonfly hover like it's weighing whether to land on your knee. Historians still argue whether ancient Roman laborers like you were proud of their work or quietly resentful. The truth, of course, is that pride and resentment often share the same cup. You drink from it every day. You pull from a small pouch, half a honey cake you saved from the morning. A bit dry now, but still sweet. You bite into it slowly, letting the grains crumble between your teeth. It tastes like childhood, like effort, like good enough. As the sun leans lower, you start to think about the people who use the spaces you clean today. A senator's aide rushing through with papers flying. A nervous couple meeting in secret. A vendor unloading amphorae of olive oil, cursing his aching back. They'll walk across your swept floors, sit on your dusted benches, leave behind their footprints, their sighs, their dropped fig seeds. You'll be back tomorrow to reset it all again. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Romans believed that sweeping dust out the front door could also sweep away bad luck. You're not superstitious, but you do always start from the inside and work outward, just in case. You lie back now, staring up at the clouds. One looks like a donkey, another like your old landlord's nose, another like nothing at all. You blink slowly and feel your whole body sinking into the earth like it's welcoming you home. You wonder briefly what people will remember when they think of Rome. The grand things, probably. Temples, emperors, gladiators, maybe the aqueducts, but not you, not the janitor. And still, part of you hopes, no trusts, that your work lingers in the quiet, in the shine of a brass door handle, in the smooth step of a worn floor. You imagine some child, decades from now, wondering why the mosaic fish by the entrance still looks so bright. Maybe they'll think it's magic. Maybe, in a way, it is. You close your eyes just for a minute, just to rest them. The dragonfly lands gently on your foot and takes off again, unconcerned. This is your Rome, not the Rome of poets or marble busts, but the Rome of rags and river breeze, of clean corners and unnoticed care. A Rome that forgets nothing, even if it never says your name. A place where every swept floor and patched leak and polished stone quietly murmurs the truth. You were here, and you mattered. Down. The city fades now. The sun slips behind the rooftops like a candle behind a curtain, and the sky cools to a deep, sleepy violet. The air is softer, the wind more tender. Even the birds have fallen quiet, tucking their heads beneath their wings in the shadows of the cypress trees. You rise slowly, feeling each part of your body rejoin the world. You brush off the grass from your tunic, gently, as if waking it from its own nap. The river whispers a final goodbye, eddies curling around your toes before you step away. Streets that once bustled are now yawning into silence. A dog curls up in a doorway. A lantern flickers behind a curtain. Laughter echoes once, then is gone. You return home by habit, not thought. The broom is still hanging, the mat still folded, all in its place, waiting for tomorrow. Inside, you lie down, pulling the blanket over your shoulder. Your bones feel warm. Your breath moves slowly. And in the dark, in that precious hush between awake and asleep, a thought lingers gently on your chest. You cleaned the day away. You kept things whole. You gave quiet shape to a noisy city. And now, the night belongs to you. No accolades, no songs, just peace, just stillness, just rest. Somewhere in a future you'll never see, someone will wonder how this empire held together. They may never say your name, but they'll walk where you walked. Sleep now, traveler. You've done enough.